Donald Trump has warned that Europe sending troops to Ukraine after a peace deal could end up in a catastrophic World War III. The U.S. president has also called for Kyiv to hold fresh elections before a ceasefire is achieved, meaning Volodymyr Zelensky could be ousted. It comes after top diplomats from the U.S. and Russia held historic peace talks on Tuesday. Speaking to reporters from his flashy Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, Trump said Ukraine's leadership allowed a war to go on that should have never happened. He also warned the conflict could escalate into a global war if Europe sends peacekeeping forces to Ukraine, as suggested by Sir Keir Starmer and backed by other European leaders. Trump said, "The war could end up in a World War III. Europe is saying they want to send troops to Ukraine. All of a sudden you are going to end up with World War III." Meanwhile, top diplomats from Russia and the U.S. on Tuesday met in Saudi Arabia to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. Present at the negotiating table was U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz all sat down in Riyadh's Diriyah Palace. They were joined by outspoken Putin cronies Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Foreign Policy Advisor Yuri Ushakov. After some 5 hours of crunch talks, both parties agreed that elections should be held in Ukraine before a final peace deal is achieved. The proposal has now sparked speculations that Zelensky could be ousted and a pro-Russian leadership could be installed in Kyiv. Trump, however, emphasized that the proposal for a fresh election in Ukraine did not come from the Russian side, but from him. He said, "We have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating, and where a country has been blown to smithereens. If Ukraine wants a seat at the table, wouldn't the people have to say it has been a long time since they had an election? That's not a Russian thing, that's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also." During the crunch talks, the U.S. delegation led by Rubio also agreed not to send any foreign troops to Ukraine. This opposes Starmer's call, backed by other European leaders, to put peacekeeping troops in Ukraine as part of any peace deal brokered by the U.S. president. Prime Minister Keir Starmer made a rallying cry to Europe, urging leaders to step up and deploy peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. The PM vowed the UK will do our bit to try and enforce a peace deal. Speaking in Paris, he said, "Europe must play its role, and I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a U.S. backstop because a U.S. security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again." The bold move put pressure on Britain's allies to also publicly back the idea of a European peacekeeping force in war-torn Ukraine. France and Sweden spoke out in favor of the plan at a crisis summit in Paris on Monday, but didn't go as far as Starmer, who said he is willing to deploy British troops. But the idea was dramatically rejected by a number of other fellow leaders. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz described Starmer's pleas as premature and highly inappropriate. He then stormed out of the meeting, adding that the sheer thought of making decisions seemingly on behalf of Ukraine was irritating. Trump is also said to withdraw U.S. troops from NATO's front line with Russia in the Baltics, a report claims. The U.S. president is looking to pull American forces out of parts of Europe. It is not clear whether that withdrawal would be part of a wider peace deal with Putin or something Trump wants to do independently of that. Just days ago, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the U.S. is no longer primarily focused on Europe's security. The historic U.S.-Russia meeting lasted for almost 5 hours, with Moscow and Washington being joined by Saudi representatives who helped monitor the talks. Both sides said they were hugely beneficial. Close Putin aide Yuri Ushakov said the talks went well, as he also revealed negotiators have agreed to talk about the war in Ukraine from either side, IFIX reported. Russia's lead negotiator told reporters after the talks, "It was a very serious conversation on all the questions we wanted to touch upon." Secretary of State Rubio said the meeting showed him that the Kremlin is finally willing to begin to engage in a serious process. U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce later said the two sides have agreed to appoint respective high-level teams to begin working on a path to ending the conflict in Ukraine as soon as possible. However, Ukraine was notably excluded from the peace talks in Riyadh, which left both President Zelensky and his European allies annoyed and frustrated. Zelensky even announced he has postponed his official visit to Saudi Arabia until March 10 despite him initially being scheduled to arrive on Wednesday. The move has been done in order to not give any legitimacy to the U.S.-Russia meeting, two sources told Reuters. He said any negotiations should not take place behind our backs, as he reiterated a peace deal will only be agreed if it is fair for all those involved, not just Putin. The rattled Ukrainian president claims Kyiv didn't know anything about the talks in Saudi Arabia this week, adding that Ukraine cannot recognize any agreements made without them. The negotiations sparked fury across the country's army high command. A senior army source told The Sun, "We will fight until the last death. We have nothing to lose. We are not going anywhere." He insisted Ukraine's forces would keep battling idiot Russian President Vladimir Putin until a deal can be reached that guarantees NATO membership for Kyiv. Putin said he is ready to speak to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky to help find an end to the war if necessary. Putin and Zelensky have never spoken directly to one another over Vlad's illegal invasion 3 years ago. But the dictator is now said to be ready to negotiate. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov announced Putin will talk to Zelensky, if necessary, to help achieve peace. Peskov said, Putin himself said that he would be ready to negotiate with Zelensky if necessary, but the legal basis of agreements needs discussion, considering the reality that Zelensky's legitimacy can be questioned. Zelensky has also said he would be prepared to compromise and meet with Putin if it means ending the bloodshed in his country. Putin is expected to make a number of deranged demands when he finally meets Trump for peace talks in order to continue his reign of tyranny. The Russian dictator is believed to want to ensure his delusional dreams of a new and powerful Soviet empire won't be blocked by any deal. Those who have spoken to Vlad claim his main ambition has always been to establish a new security framework that allows Russia to have a strong Soviet sphere of influence in Europe. This means a deal would only be agreed if Russia keep the land they have already stolen, expanding their own borders. Ukraine would also have to give back the Russian city of Kursk, which they managed to counter-invade last year. Another key demand of Moscow is to ban Kyiv from joining NATO. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has also been adamant that there is no chance Ukraine would be allowed membership to the group. Brave Zelensky has long campaigned with European leaders to grant Kyiv a spot, as it would give them protection over Putin's army. Putin will also be pressing for an end to banking and industrial sanctions, as well as travel curbs on Russians imposed following his illegal invasion 3 years ago. However, Marco Rubio stressed that the Trump administration would not lift Russia sanctions at least until a peace deal is finalized to end the Ukraine war.